Hello! In this video we'll be finding relative cumulative and relative cumulative frequency in StatCrunch for both raw and summary data. So finding these frequencies by hand can be very time consuming, but luckily StatCrunch lets us calculate them much more quickly. So first, let's start with our summary data. If data is presented in summary form, this means that it is already separated into bins and organized into a frequency table, as we can see here. Frequency tables are a method of summarizing categorical or qualitative data. And here we have qualitative data in the form of category names, and then the frequency or count of each item. So for example, we know from this table that there are 589 items in the D category and 917 items in the E category. The question then asks us to find relative frequency, cumulative frequency, and relative cumulative frequency for the data. So in order to do this by hand, we would have to find the total count of all of our items and then apply the formulas for relative frequency and cumulative frequency multiple times. But StatCrunch will do this for us very quickly. So once we have our data entered into StatCrunch like this, we just click on Data, Compute, Multiple Expressions. So first, let's calculate our frequency. Naming your expressions here is optional, but I'll call this first one relative freq. And then we just click on Build. It will open up this window, and now we enter the formula for relative frequency. So recall that the formula for relative frequency is relative frequency equals frequency divided by the sum of all frequencies. And in StatCrunch, this is created by double-clicking on the name of the column that contains our frequency numbers. Here it's called frequency. And then click or type the division symbol. And now we scroll down in the functions box until we find the sum function. Double-click on that. Now find your column name again and double-click again. Then we hit OK. Okay, so we're taken back to this screen. And here you can see it entered our expression into the window. Now we just hit Compute, and notice that we have a new column called Relative Frequency with all of our results automatically calculated. You just have to be sure to round your numbers to the correct number of decimals when you're giving your answers. Next, let's find cumulative frequency. Again, we click on Data, Compute, Multiple Expressions. This time, I'll call our expression cumu freq. And again, we click on Build. And recall that cumulative frequency is found by adding each of the frequency values in each row. And StatCrunch has a function that does this automatically. So look in the functions box again, but this time we're going to look for a function called cumsum. Double-click on that. Now double-click on our frequency again. This tells StatCrunch that we want to find the cumulative sum of all of our frequency values. Okay. So now we just click OK, and then Compute, and we can see that a new column has been created with the cumulative frequency values for our data. Finally, let's find relative cumulative frequency for this data set. And this process is very similar to the process for finding regular cumulative frequency that we just did. First, we start by clicking Data, Compute, Multiple Expressions. This time I'll call our column rel cum freq. Okay, now click on Build again. So remember that cumulative frequency, relative cumulative frequency, simply takes the relative frequencies in each row and adds them up, totaling up to a final value of 1. And this process requires the same cumsum function that we used before. But this time, instead of using the frequency column, we will select the relative frequency variable instead. And this tells StatCrunch to compute the cumulative sum of all of our relative frequency values, which is what we want. Now we click on OK, and then compute. Okay, and now after you click out, it'll sometimes pop up these boxes. We can click out of those. And now we'll see our new column with the relative frequency, or relative cumulative frequency values. Notice too that these add up to 1. This will always be true with relative cumulative frequency. Okay, so now let's consider a second example. Say that instead of summary data, we were instead given a table of raw data values and asked to find the same information. So in this example, we have a column of data that just contains letter grades for a certain class. And we want to know the frequency, the cumulative frequency, and the relative cumulative frequency for each of these grades. In other words, we want to be able to answer questions like how many A's, B's, and C's did we have? And if we chose a random student, what's the probability that their grade would be an A or a B? We need the frequency counts and the relative frequency in order to find the answers. And luckily, computing these values for raw data is much simpler than it is for summary data. So we just need to go to Stat, and then Tables, Frequency. In the frequency window, select the name of the column containing your data values. Here, that's grades. Now, under the statistics box, we're going to click and drag to highlight all of our options. Next, under the output, click the box next to the store in data table. Okay, now we have everything we need and we can just hit compute. Okay, so now we can see that StatCrunch has created a bunch of new columns for us. We have one listing the frequency values, one listing the relative frequency values, and one listing the relative cumulative frequency values. And notice again that the relative cumulative frequency adds up to 1. And also notice that the cumulative frequency values here, total is 67. And that is the total number of grades that we had in our original data set. Okay, so I hope you found this video helpful. If you're a UNT student, there'll be some links to other resources in the video description. Thank you so much for watching.